Yeah, against some other Potzer. Do you remember the time control? Oh, while you're there, the next opponent is Amnon, but this one is some other Potzer and Amon. I don't have the time controls given on these. Okay, right. Hmm. Okay, that's good. That tells me what I need to know. Okay, before I actually start this, I want to show you an opening I play, which will relate to your opening. The way and this way, if you run into this position again, you'll know what to do. Back in 1986, I started playing a defense to the Queen's Gambit called the Chigorin defense. Mikhail Chigorin is considered the founder of the Soviet school of chess, so to speak. He was a very strong grandmaster at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and it probably at his best he was maybe the number 2 or 3 player in the world. He drew a match with Siegbert Tarrasch, who in turn lost matches to Emanuel Lasker for the world championship. But anyway, a lot of people didn't like Chigorin's move because it blocks the C pawn. Even people today will criticize this defense. And I'm not going to give you a whole dissertation on this opening, but I'm going to show you a related line. Uh, this this bishop g4 is the main line, and a lot of different things happen which are beyond the scope of what you and I can do today. But let's get down to his first move, knight f3. Now, often what I would, and a friend of mine does this too, we will play knight c6 against this move. Okay, and the reason we do this, like for instance, take my friend, if they play e4, he will play e5 because my friend will defend a double king pawn opening with e5. Okay, and myself, I have the option to play this crazy gambit, and I won't go into that. I've made a video on it. Uh, Against d4, I will play d5, and if they play c4, I'm back in this line here. With my friend, what he does, he likes to play the Alban counter gambit, and he will play e5 here. So this is a way both of us can come up with a useful defense on the first move against knight f3. Okay, so that's what we do. So let's get back to your game here, and it will transpose. Let's see, you played d5, and now he played d4, and here you played knight c6. Okay, so now you're right in the same possibilities both my friend and I have. If c4, you can play e5 or you can play bishop g4. But you do have to know something about these openings. Well, one thing that I have discovered over the years, many, many, many times, when I reached this position in a similar move order, knight f3, knight c6, d4, d5, I've run into this many times. I run into the exact move that you did, the exact same move. And somebody's calling me. Who's calling me on Skype? Uh, anyway, oops, I just hit my. I've lost you. Somehow I've lost you. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. Hold on, we try to get the call back. Okay, are you back? Okay. I know I lost my screen for a second. I was clicking the wrong tabs at the top. Anyway, I've run into this exact same move you do. There's actually in one of my books on the Chigorin defense. I have one of the best collections of of games and books on this opening. There is an entire chapter devoted to this move. But what I've found, the best move to play is Bishop G4, and there's a lot of reasons for this. And I'm not going to bore you to death. I mean, I wouldn't use those terms. I'm not going to spend all day covering some of the main ideas, but I often run into moves something like this, and they break the pin, and then I put my bishop here, and then they bring it back, and I'll develop the knight. Then they'll play c4, and now they might push. They don't always push, but I'm just kind of showing you what can happen. And then I usually, at some point, I have to transfer this knight. This knight's not well posted on c6, but that gives up the e5 square, and sometimes they go right for it. And I need to trade a bishop. And the game kind of reaches a pretty level balanced position. They may actually take here first, and now I got to be careful they don't try to castle queenside and launch an attack against me. You can see the idea here, but it tends to lead to a relatively even position. And I've made other changes within the system. I've tried different things. Often I will play. I won't even play the knight to f6 right away. Let me back it up a little. I'm hitting the wrong button. Trying to back up. What I will do is I won't play knight f6. I'll push this pawn up to f5. This is kind of an interesting line. But we'll see how the lack of your bishop on g4 has an effect on your game. But that's the move you need to play, is right in the open, because your game kind of got a little difficult. Let me find the right point. Let's see. d5. Now he played bishop f4, right? And you played knight f6, I think. I got to find the place where this is in the PGN. I'm probably going to have to wipe it out. Now there it goes. Okay, knight f6. So he now played e3. And here's pretty much I think, is your last chance to play bishop g4. You do need to play it because it starts getting into a little bit of difficulty here. You're looking to develop your bishop this way. Well, this is fine. There's nothing wrong with developing. How can one see what could possibly go wrong? Well, here's where the wrinkle comes in of what's wrong with the strategy. You have to realize that you're in that Chigorin defense, and you have to understand the ways to play it. And one of the keys to be able to play is to get the bishop to g4. And I even still think now, I think this actually you have one more chance to play this move. Maybe you have two or three. Let's see. But I still think you need to play bishop g4. And we'll see how it gets you in difficulty here. Now it might be too late. Now you mentioned in your note you didn't want to give up a pawn. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's see, for instance, if this works. Pawn takes. Now here you have a possibility of losing a pawn. Okay. Now I can definitely see why you wouldn't want to do that. So maybe it's too late to do that. So you had to do the bishop to g4 one more move earlier. Because the one thing missing from your game right now, the move you need to play to hold your center together, is to be able to play e6. But the problem in this position is that your bishop is behind your pawns. And the fact that you've played g6 takes a potential retreat square away from your bishop. Were this bishop on g4 and they play h3, well, you can keep the pin alive. You can put it back on h5. And if they kick it again, you have the option to coming to g6. So this might be your best move here, but at the same time, you've said I'm going to play with a bad piece. It makes your game difficult, but your game would have stayed a little more solid, I believe. So you castled, and now I'm just going to restore the PGN here. There's a problem. I've probably told you this before. Chess.com, every time you play a variation, it adds it to the window over here to the right. And when you keep adding variations and then you try to go back, it replaces the main line with your new line, and it's next to impossible to find out where you want to go. I'm hoping they fix it when they get this version 3. And my solution is I just reset the game. So here, but it's kind of funny. I don't like computer analysis, but I wanted to see what the computer said. The computer actually says you're okay here, simply because you're getting some development. But I don't know if it's enough. Your idea here is to swing a rook to the C file and try for some active play. White has to get developed. Let's go ahead and put the bishop back here. Now, how are you going to make progress? Well, you have a check, but you're kind of forced to playing a pawn down here. Who wants to do that if you don't have to? I don't quite see what the chess engine likes about it. I think you were correct to do it, to not give up the pawn, but at the same time, the way you played it, you end up giving up a pawn. And then the evaluation changes from pretty much dead even to you down a whole bunch. So, like I say, I generally don't like to evaluate with a computer, but I did in this case, simply because the way you played it, it just seemed to give him a clear advantage, and I wanted to find out what could you have done differently aside from missing bishop g4. Was it that critical that you missed that move? Okay, so let's see. So you put your knight on b4, but now he's able to bolster this pawn on d5, and again you have to play a pawn down. So which pawn would you prefer to lose? Did you see that he could do this and that you would lose a pawn? Okay, now there's one other possibility here, and you actually find it. Now you find the right move, bishop g4. And here, for what it's worth, you're threatening to double his pawns, because your threat is to play bishop takes, and he has to take back with the pawn, else you get this very powerful check. And, oops, hit the wrong button. But he breaks the pin, and what to do now? Let's say this. Okay, let's stop and take stock. You have the same number of minor pieces developed, and you've castled. That's your only advantage. You have, and it's your move. You have a tempo and a half advantage. It takes 3 tempos to have compensation for a pawn. So from a logical point of view, you don't have enough. What can you do to rectify this? Well, your knight doesn't really have any good squares. None of your pieces, unfortunately, really have good squares. The only chance you have is to try to break this position open somehow. Let's look at some possible ways to break the position open, and let's see if we can come up. Because sometimes you get a bad game like this, it can get worse on you, or it can suddenly get better because you want to make it difficult on your opponent. There's 4 possible pawn moves here that might upset the apple cart. If you do any of them, it kind of changes things. Let's try c5 for the fun of it. Now we don't know what he's going to do. It's his move. He could kick your knight for all we know. But if he does, you have time to take a pawn and be on his knight. But let's just suppose he plays en passant. Now, here, your knight's back in play that was on b4, and you're provoking him to advance his center pawns. That's the idea. You want him to advance his center pawns so that he doesn't control as much territory, and that you can start finding some squares to slip into. Like, for instance, if e5, you're able to occupy d5. You have a hole, okay? If he plays, and then you just go from there, keep developing pieces. You relish in the fact that you've shut his bishop in. You're happy he has a backward d-pawn on the open file. You're happy your queen can come out to b6 and not only pressure b2, but keep pressuring e5. And I have no idea what the computer says about these things, but we don't need to consult it. We're just looking for ways to activate your game. Now, d5 could be a little tougher nut to crack. But d5, so you can't go into e5. But you can do something different here. You can redeploy the knight to... You're trying to get this knight to c5 because he's giving you that square. Okay, you're coming back to b8, but you can afford to do that because he's behind in development. Now keep in mind you have a fully open diagonal. It's just blocked by a couple knights. You're getting some activity for your bishop. Now if you go to use this d7 square, you may end up having to trade off your bishop. Let's just look at that possibility. But that gives you better control over e5. Let's see. Knight c5 is a possibility. Even, but once again, you're down a pawn. But at least you're getting some play here. You're trying to find some way to activate your pieces and make life miserable for your opponent. Now let's go ahead and look at something a little different. Let's look at e6. E6 puts the question to his pawn center right now. Okay. Now it's a little double-edged. Here you're accepting a bad pawn. Okay, but in compensation for it, you have tactical threats. Okay, you might be attacking a pawn here. Like let's just assume he castles, which he needs to do. You can play a move like this. Now, if he takes your knight, you can take his bishop. So he may play something like this, and it gets crazy. Pow, just like that. Now, what's happening? You have 4 pieces. He has 3. I believe you're winning. Well, maybe not. He can play bishop here, and he's forking. He's on 3 of your pieces, but that's okay. We can get out of there. Let's grab a pawn. Now it's better for him to take a piece than to take the exchange. But look what's happened. Okay, you now have 5 pawns. He has 5. You've gotten your pawn back, and you've got pressure on d4. You have some reasonable chances here. And like I say, all I'm doing is I'm just trying to find ways to get you some activity.
Yeah, but my question is, for sure you understand that I can't see all that in advance, right?
Right.
So when I'm looking for, at that stage, I already felt that my position is pretty, that I'm strangled. So the question is, do I look for a breaking move and just believing it's going to be okay? Or do I try to calculate to the end?
Well, it's impossible to calculate this to the end. If you're a super grandmaster, you can sit there and look at all these valuations. See, I just know that moves like this make your opponent think. You don't want your opponent to have an easy time of this, and we'll talk about that as the game progresses. E6 puts an interesting dilemma on him. He's got to examine a whole bunch of candidate moves. He might play this. Well, that's okay. Let him. If he's gonna take your knight like he did in the game, let him. There's nothing you can do about it. But you see, my point is, you still have you're threatening to win your pawn back right now. You're threatening pawn takes, knight takes, and you've got your pawn back. He has to solve this position, and you're accepting weaknesses. Look at your pawn structure is shattered. You got four bad pawns, and you're down a pawn, but you've created play. You've created possible counter chances here, and he has to consume clock time figuring this out. So I'm just doing this off of basically off of experience, and by showing you the experience, we can shortcut things. Your bishop g4, I believe, is correct because But now the key move, and I say we're looking at all these ways to hit a center, all those different ways, and I think I've hit on it right here. This is a good way to hit the center because you accept a weakness, but you gain something. Now he's got some interesting moves too. He could play queen b3, but maybe he can't. Maybe you play this move. Now he has to accept double pawns because if he takes with the bishop, there's an annoying check. And on d3, if he takes your knight, hey, you can go grab a pawn here. And after his rook moves, you're going to get another pawn. He's going to get a pawn, but suddenly your king looks a lot safer than his does. So all this, if this was a correspondence chess game where the online game they call, you have time to sit and work all these things out. But in an over-the-board game, your clock is ticking, and what you want, one of your strategies is you want your opponent to be spending clock time. You want your opponent to have to try to find the best move. Let's see what happens. And you know what? Objectively, White's better here. Even if we were to give this position to a grandmaster or put Houdini chess engine on it, it's going to show you why White's going to crush Black because Black's made some mistakes and gotten a bad game. But you're not playing a grandmaster. You're not playing Houdini. You're playing somebody that you're quite capable of beating if you can get them to lose their way. You want to make it as tough on your opponent as possibly can. So I think e6. It's kind of sad in a way you have to resort to a move like that in the opening, but on move 9 that you have to take such desperate measures. But that's basically because the opening failed. Now this move seems to be designed that you want to play c6. But now I think it makes it easy for your opponent. You didn't threaten anything. All you're doing is you're intending to play this. You haven't played it yet. So this makes it easier for your opponent. He sees, he's wanting to play c6. So I'll drive that knight away. And now you make it easy again. He makes double, gives you a set of double pawns. Now his next move is easy. He sees a pawn and he attacks it. Okay? So in a way, you've given him 3 easy moves. e6 would have made him think. And he has to come up with the right solution. He has to solve the position over the board. Now you counterattack, and in a way, this makes the move easy for him too. He realizes this pawn is weak. He's in no hurry to take it. He doesn't want your rook on his 7th rank, so he plays here. So he's had 4 easy moves in a row, and now once again he has an easy move. This c5 square is a great outpost for White, especially with your pawn on a6. You can't challenge it. So he gains a tempo, and he's going to head into c5 if he so chooses. So you kind of have to play there to keep an eye on your a6 pawn. Now he could go ahead and play knight c5. I don't know why he didn't. But here, what's really changed in the last 6 moves? The only thing that's changed is your queen side. Let's just do a comparison. Let's look at this position as opposed to if you'd played e6. Look at the black position. Did it change at all other than e6? On the queen, on the king side, I don't think it did. And I'm not even sure if his position changed on the king side. Let's see. Let's let's look at his position now. No, his position on the king side didn't change. Amazing, huh? Now let's focus on the queen side. Here he's got his queen, his knight, and his rook all in play. You've opened up a new file. You've got some double pawns, and your rook is up there. But really, not much changed. Uh, well, actually, one difference on the king side, he no longer has a light squared bishop, but that's okay. But this is basically he's made a lot of progress in the last several moves. So uh, if you know when I get a bad game against a lower rated player, I try to complicate the thing if I can. I got to give him a chance to go wrong. If my opponent is in time pressure and I have two good moves, if one of my moves forces his next reply, I'm not going to play that move if my other move is just as good. And the reason is I want him to take time on his clock because time is a part of the game. Okay, so let's find out where we were. So here you admit that uh, your game is passive, but you have to stop and guard this pawn. And now this bishop has zero activity. Well, it's pressuring d4 a little bit, but the knight maybe he can get into play by way of d6. But I think he played knight c5, and now you brought your bishop back. So suddenly the only piece you have beyond the second rank is this rook. It's kind of hard to get anything going, and your game is just kind of going downhill. Now, here you've got the right idea. It's just at the wrong time. You're trying to attack his pawn center, his pawn base, and open up some lines. But when you first could have done it, you were ahead in development. Now you're not ahead in development. He's actually ahead in development. So that makes a big difference who has the development. This also weakens the square, and he comes in and occupies it. And you're doing a good job getting the game opened up, but now you get your knight in, you shield this. This is making sense. You're doing okay. Here you're only down a pawn. Let's see. It says here, looks like you got back in the game, but the cost is to have less than 5 minutes on my clock, while he has about 17 minutes. Okay, so that's interesting. I was talking about the time. Had you played e6, he might have had 10 minutes on his clock, and you might have had 8 minutes on your clock, because you probably had to spend time trying to find some of these other moves. And here, at some point, you need to play a5 and just get it over and done with. I think a5 is virtually forced. Is there a reason why you didn't play that? Right. Okay, well, that's understandable. Right. Right. Okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's. I see what you played. You played, and I see why you played it. You played Queen E8 to defend your pawn because it works against a pin. Uh, there's Coach Dan Heisman has a expression called hope chess. It means different than what mine. I'm not going to explain what his means. I have a version of hope chess too. By Queen E8, what you're saying is instead of A5, when you play Queen E8, you're hoping your opponent takes this pawn so you can take his queen. That's what you're hoping for. But against a good player, it's not going to happen. Against a weak player, they will go and play something like that. So let's just talk basics here. You've got a one pawn deficit, and suddenly you only have two weak pawns. He does have a pawn ahead, but his pawn majority is on the king side. For him to win this game, if he can't checkmate you, he has to win it in the ending. That means he has to force a passed pawn, and he has to force it through. Generally speaking, but not always, if you can get pawns on one side of the board and you're a pawn down, your drawing chances increase. So anytime you have a weak pawn, this should be a natural move to play. Well, first off, let's just make a bad move for white. Okay, let's see what happens. Pawn takes, rook takes. Now suddenly, look what's happened. You're no longer a pawn down, you're a pawn ahead. And you have an outside pass pawn. And even if you end up losing this pawn, and there's no guarantee you will, you're down to what I'm saying. All the pawns are on one side of the board. Your drawing chances have increased. So A5 puts the question to him. How can he defend this? You're threatening to win a pawn. So he either has to take or he has to defend his pawn. Or he has to counterattack something else. Well, let's look at counterattacking something else. Well, let him. Okay, now you're threatening to take this pawn. Get all the pawns on one side of the board. Mission accomplished. You got all the pawns on one side of the board. So you're happy if he plays rook A6. So let's try rook B1. Well, got rid of one pawn. Now, can you get rid of the other one? That's the question. If you can get rid of the other one, you've suddenly got terrific drawing chances. Let's put the queen here. Now we're threatening to take it. So let's suppose he protects it with his queen by moving his pawn. Well, now we can take advantage of a pin, and suddenly it looks like we're going to win that pawn. So what else can he try? I'm sorry? Now A4 you just take on B4. Yeah, and then you don't care if you lose these two pawns. You've got all the pawns on one side of the board, and there's no guarantee you're going to lose those pawns. So that gives one more move we haven't looked at. Okay, well, now you got him down to one pawn each. Okay, your rook's a little out of play, but it is attacking a pawn. So once again, he's going to have to deal with that. How is he going to do it? Well, we don't know. He could play rook C3. He could play rook A1. He could play queen D3. He could play queen E3. We don't know what he's going to do, but at least you've gotten rid of one pawn, and this pawn doesn't look as weak as it did a moment ago. So these are the kind of things you're going to have to almost see naturally, and this makes him think, because I looked through. The best line, as it turned out, was if he takes your pawn. So you want to be able to see these things and recognize that you have to do it. But queen A8 just lets him play. No, he didn't take. He played D5. And now you still need to play A5. It's still doable. But you attack that pawn. And now he made a threat, which you missed. We'll just owe that to being behind on the clock, because you see, when your rook moved up, you weakened your back rank. In my other line, you're not, you don't have a weak back rank. So you had drawing chances with A5, okay, at that earlier stage. And anytime you have double pawns, if you can get rid of one of them, undouble them. Usually it's not a bad thing. Oh, another thing about A5, I didn't even examine this move. I was taking back with the rook. You could take with the queen. That's playable too. Uh, and maybe you're going to win that pawn. Maybe, I don't know. But his work is cut out for him. I think you hold on for a while. Okay, let's move over to the other game. Uh, or the next game. He said no clock. Okay, so reset. Okay, you mentioned that.
You're gonna like this game because remember last time we talked about moving a piece and then returning it back,
Right.
which gave my opponent two moves in a row. So now this game I did it twice in a row, so he got four moves free. And it was always in the back of my mind trying not to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but he did it twice.
Uh-oh.
So I feel at myself. So I said, first of all, I'm gonna confess. I'm gonna show it to you.
Okay.
So hopefully I'm gonna be so ashamed after you
That
go over it, I won't do it again.
that'll never happen again. I actually had a game recently where I did it, but it came with a purpose. I put a bishop in the same pawn structure here. This pawn was here. I attacked his. Actually, this bishop went to this square. I attacked his pawn on e3 to induce him to play f4 to weaken his pawn structure. I gave him a free move, but it had a purpose. So sometimes, there's an exception to every rule we tell you. Now you mentioned here opening books say to play e4, and it's a whole new game. They call this the modern defense. Black strikes at your center from the wings, and but e3 is totally playable, but it does shut your bishop in.
Right. And this is going to be the problem for the whole game.
Okay, so now you're working on. He's trying to control e4. I like the way you tried to chase him out of there, but I think you got a little. Oh, I got to flip the board. I want you on the bottom. Okay. Here I think you got a little off on a tangent with your knights. Do you know what the Kali system is?
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about my opening knowledge. Okay, I do know some names, so I do know the names and I do know the few opening moves, but I certainly didn't go over into any kind of learning this opening seriously or learning the variations. I'm just trying to play. Hopefully, usually the guys I'm playing with, they don't know either. So it seems waste of time to try and really dig into the openings. I do it afterwards.
Okay, well that's good. If you're studying the openings afterwards, that's fine. And you're right. At the lower level, you don't need to know the openings because they don't know them. What's going to happen? It's all part of the way my program works. When you can correct, the idea is to correct the mistakes you're making so that you can start winning games that you would have lost or drawn, or drawing games you would have lost. The whole objective is to improve your results. And I'll just kind of like go into a little digression here, just so it's reinforced. If we talk about it again, maybe it'll sink in. I'm not saying that you're not bright, couldn't do it, but we're trying to establish a something that you can say to yourself every time you sit down and play a game. Okay, when you start out with a game of chess, your game is dead even. You both have the same number of pieces in the exact symmetrical position. And the only way you're going to lose a game is if you make a mistake. You could make the first mistake, you could make the last mistake. Sometimes you can be totally winning and make the last mistake and suddenly you lose. You could make the first mistake and then your opponent makes the last mistake and then you outplay them. But without making a mistake, nobody can win the game, and that's what's required. So your objective is to find out what you're doing wrong and correct that. Because what my program basically says is that when you can identify what you're doing wrong, you'll set yourself apart from the level of players you're currently playing. You will be able to beat them, as I said. But the key is that this makes your rating go up. And what that all boils down to is when your rating is up, you get to play higher rated players. And that's where your game will improve, by playing a higher rated player. If you're 1100, you can't get too many games against an 1800. If you're 1100, you can get all the games you want against a 1200 and 1300. But unless you correct your mistakes against those 12 and 1300s, you're not going to beat them, and you're going to stay at 1100. But if you correct your mistakes, because all these 12 and 1300s are beatable, they're easily beatable because they make mistakes just like you do. You'll see them as we go. The games you won. Case in point, look at those mistakes those people made, right? Yeah. So you want to correct if you correct your mistakes, you'll win the games, and then that'll make your rating go up. Then you're going to play the guys that don't make as many mistakes as you do. and they're going to have certain techniques and methods that will work for them. And then if you're playing online chess, which you say you are, now you can look up the opening as you go. You can get a proper adequate position from a book without having to remember it when you're sitting down and playing a live game, right? You're able to learn the opening, learn the variations, and then one day you'll play a live game and you'll be able to play the exact same opening you did in a correspondence game. And now, as a result of what you learn in correspondence, you're going to get out of the opening with a very playable game. If you get a very playable game, and you're off and running, right? It's pretty much, yeah, right, exactly. That's what we're trying to do. So let's continue with this game. And I just walked over to get another Coke. Hang on. Continuing with this game, let's talk about the Culle. I asked you if you know. It doesn't matter if you know it or not. But basically, White plays these exact same moves you've played, and then tries to play e4 at the right time, but while your opponent's blocked it. But you still want to follow that strategy. Now here, I think your knight gets misplaced. Okay, but now you've got the right idea. You're trying to evict this knight out so you can play e4. But he plays e5 first. And now you kick him out. And I've used this exact same method myself to take this outpost away from my opponent. The one drawback with this move is it weakens your e3 square, but he's not posed to take advantage of it. There's no pressure on the pawn. The file isn't open. He doesn't have enough attackers on it. Okay. Now let's see. Here I think you may have missed a reasonable move here. That's what you say in your note. What about? Let's look at this one differently. Did you consider taking this bishop?
I tell you what, I remembered what you said last time about bishop and then bishop.
That,
The white first bishop is obviously my good
right.
movement, so I didn't want to trade it.
Okay. That makes sense. You're following my instruction. Okay. All right. Here comes my counter to that. Every rule I tell you is made to be broken, if you can find a way to justify it. Now, you said you think taking here is better, or even this. If you play here, you're also following the logic. If he takes, you get to improve the position of a piece. Right. That makes sense. But at the same time, you're admitting that your opponent can trade off your good bishop. But let's look at what you get out of it. Watch this. What does he do? I think he only has one move. He has to take it. Okay? Now go ahead and take his pawn here. Okay? Now, surprise, surprise. He's got a problem. He's got more than a problem. He can't take your pawn. Well, how are you going to take it? Knight or bishop? And I got a fork. Okay. Now I think you get it in your line too. But you see, what I wanted to explain was you created a weakness in his position, and that outweighs giving up your better bishop. Okay. If it's okay to trade your better bishop if you can gain something permanent for it. And here you had a permanent gain of giving him a very weak pawn. Now let's look at your move. I still don't think he can take. You're right. Your better is to take here. What can he do? He can't take it again, can he? Oh, actually he can. He can. He can take with the knight, or he can stop and take this first. Now the question is, see, if you take with the queen, you get tempoed. Knight takes as a tempo. Now, if he takes here, I think he's going to walk into a fork. You don't fork right away because he has knight takes here. And then you fork. So I think you were winning a pawn. So here you've kind of just taken a slight step back, but it's okay. Your game is still fine. Now he's back on e4, and you no longer have a chance to break with e4. And let's see. You took, saying black planted his pawn right in white's throat for the rest of the game. Well, is it really that much of a problem? Let's find out. This square makes sense. It's a good diagonal for your bishop. And see, here you say from here, white gives black 4 free moves.
I was going after the e4 pawn. So I was trying to maneuver and eventually trying to open a line on the diagonal for my c1 bishop.
Right. I can see that.
I was trying to maneuver the knight somehow, and then maybe going with the knight, with the rook, attacking the e pawn.
Okay.
That didn't go very well.
Right. I can see how with knight c5 he just kicks you and you go back. But what else can you do here? Let's actually just back up ever so slightly and not take that pawn yet. I think you have to take the pawn because if you move your bishop somewhere, you run into a discovery. And so that was the flaw with queen c2, that he had an e4 push. So you are pretty much forced to take. And bishop c4 does make sense. Trying to win this pawn makes sense too. But here's one thing I like to talk about. That pawn isn't going anywhere. Okay? It's always going to have to be defended. And right now it's being defended by 2 pieces. So you don't have to necessarily win it in the next 4 moves, even if you can maneuver. You could win it later. Let's see. What if let's try this move just for the fun of it. Oh no, that's not fun enough. I want to put the rook here at some point, but it's not enough. Here's what you need to do. You need to get this bishop up and get this rook over in play. And this bishop can always slip back to c1 and your rook's out of the woods. Okay, let's see what you did do. Now he came back. There's 2 moves. Now here his free moves have been to move up here. So, I saw this when I looked over the game. In a way, it's not that bad. He now has a weakness. he has a bad pawn on c6. Uh, so once again, here's where you need to get this rook into play. And here you gave him two free moves again. And now he goes back. At some point you could kick this knight, but it makes your king side very, very weak. You could also consider a move like this, but it makes f3 very, very weak. I think that's what you ended up doing. You ended up pushing g3, and he got into f3. See? Now he's not threatening anything really. Whoops, that's one hit back. He's not really threatening anything yet. You don't have. Yeah, he's going to be sending this knight in here, but he's not doing it yet. Let's hold just a moment. And here's a time you might play rook f4. That shuts the diagonal down. Now, I'm not saying it's the best move, but like for instance, if he plays here, well, hey, let's take it off. That's one less piece to worry about that could attack you with. And let's say he keeps his pawn structure intact. Now you play c4 to keep him out of d5. And let's see. He goes back on the diagonal. I don't know what else to do for him, but I'm trying to get some play for you here. Now you got c5. Hey, look at that. If he takes with the pawn, you're hoping he does, you get your knight here. But you're taking his queen off this diagonal you've shut down. And now you play a move like rook c1. And what's he going to do? Knight g4. Let's try that for the fun of it. Now you offer him a queen trade. Although this might be bad, I think he can win some material here. And he's going to win on e3. But here, go ahead and just kick that knight out. It's not doing anything. Kick him back. Then maybe, even though it's weakening your position, maybe you can drive him back. And now you're getting close to maybe winning that pawn on e4. I don't like weakening your position here, but at the same time, what I've done is I've pushed him back, and he doesn't have to play knight e6. That let you trade a piece off. That helped you reduce the pressure, because this is a very strong knight, as it turns out. And the reason I put it here not only was to attack the rook, but also to open up this diagonal. And this is a kind of move that makes him think. Okay, what's he going to do against it? Maybe he'll play here. Well, okay, fine, take it. Okay, if he takes, maybe you're going to get some play here. Now you've opened up a diagonal for your bishop. Okay, if he pins, you push again. And, maybe you're getting somewhere here. You've taken a lot of the sting out of his attack. So g3 just, it was a little too early. Let him make a threat first, then play it if you have to. And now this is just a simple and natural move that's very easy to play. You've weakened your pawn structure. He's going to try to break you open. Okay. And now he pins your knight. Your knight's trying to help, so you break the pin. And now he comes up with a pawn sacrifice, but it works out for him. His knight's getting into play, and there it comes, knight f3 check. And now the position is getting very difficult for you. Now he's threatening to play f2 check. So he's made, how many pawns did he sacrifice here? 2? You have 7 pawns, he has 5. But he has a persistent initiative. And let's see, try to find you a better plan here. this bishop needs to get into play. What about e4?
Yeah. My post analysis shows I should have played it for probably.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe yeah, maybe E or rook to E1 first.
Right. Well, e4 right away, it preserves a square for your rook. You're not sure where you want to go. Here with e4, uh, you might be going to e5, but also most importantly, see, you're giving this bishop a chance to breathe. Give yourself options. You don't have to advance this pawn center. This is a perfect pawn center. You can advance it later. Once you advance it, you can't back it up. So I'm mainly looking at e4 to get you some breathing room. Uh, so you played rook e1, I think, and here you miscalculated the sacrifice. Yeah, you do mention e4 would have been better, and I agree. Here's one thing. Let's assume for a moment, and I'll try to give you my mentality when I was playing games like those games I have in the Rat Pack of my chess career. I had an assumption if I was a pawn ahead, I was winning, uh, and I would go to any length I could to steal a pawn, and then what I would try to do is win a pawn, trade everything off, and then win the king and pawn ending. Well, what often happened was uh, my opponent wouldn't let me trade off all the pieces, and I would end up getting a bad game trying to just trade them off. And then if they were good players, they would see through my transparent threats and stop them, and I would get the bad game. So uh, it's nice to go up third pawn, but you don't need it. You're getting out of the woods here. He's made some interesting play here. Maybe he didn't play it right, but there's no need to go for another pawn. We just have to put this mindset in our mind or in our head that we don't need it. We can win that pawn later. There's an old expression, maybe like or old kind of a dirty joke in a way. Two bulls were at the top of a hill, and they looked down into the pasture below, and it was full of cows. And the young bull says to the older bull, "Let's run down to the pasture and screw all the cows." And the older bull said, "Let's walk down and or no, he said, no, wait a minute. The younger one says, let's run down and screw one of the cows." He says, "Let's walk down and do them all." So that's the joke. So here, you don't need to run down the hill and grab that pawn. You're going to get everything. You're going to get this king if you just play it carefully. Okay, so you grab that. And let's see what's happened. You're down a piece, but you have 4 pawns for it. It looks okay, but he's got some pressure, and look at this knight. He's misplaced. He's never been able to get in the game.
And my king can move.
Yeah, your king is kind of stuck. And now you can't even put your rook on e2. He gets a back rank mate. And yeah, unfortunately the game is just gone. You're going to get checkmated here. And no matter which way you go with your king, it's mate next move. So
Since I didn't find a good way out of it during the game, and in my post-mortem, I didn't either find a good way. I put it into I gave it to Stockfish,
mm-hmm.
and of course he found the perfect way of defending it. I was the computer estimation was minus 2 pawns, but I was out of checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in my variations there. I totally missed that continuation.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's come down. Let's back it up ever so slightly here. Just try to get a couple closing thoughts on it. Uh, he didn't have to play h4. What if he checks you right now? That just looks very inviting. You're pretty much forced to coming over here in the corner. Am I correct?
I lost the analysis
Oh, I forgot about that.
for
Uh,
Yair.
yeah. Get back in live chess and I'll send you another one.
Okay.
There you are. Okay. Instead of him playing h4, what if he plays knight check? You either have to give up the exchange or move your king. You have three legal moves. If you put your king on e1, you drop the pawn on h2. But now he's able to bring his other knight into play. And here I think something is giving. I think you have to lose some material here. If your rook moves, he's able to take another pawn, and now G3 has problems. He could take with the other knight if he wanted. He has a happy choice here to figure out which one's better and take it. So I think he missed a good continuation. Let's see. Well, I didn't want to go. It's stuck, and I started taking it back. I want to take it forward again. But let's get back and look at this one more. Wait, not here. Okay, but playing G3 allowed him that F3 thing. Didn't have to allow that. Didn't have to give him access to that. Here he sacked the pawn. And now he sacks another pawn. And here's where you took on F7. Let's see, you took with the bishop. What if you took with the rook? I'm not saying you don't have to do this act, but what if you can always you don't have to go up a third pawn here. But I'm just saying it's a possibility. But E4 just seems to make sense. Let him prove what he can do here. E4 takes F5 away. It takes D5 away. If at a timely moment it plans E5, pushing his queen back, blending his bishop. It opens up this line for your bishop. Also, maybe you can get rid of his good bishop there. That's even though this is your good bishop, they're both pretty good actually now because you've activated this. This is his good bishop now. You want to get rid of it, even though it was his bad bishop theoretically earlier. Well, actually, it was his good bishop. But anyway, you might want to be trading that off. And he has to justify being down 2 pawns. I think you're winning this game. So the mistake here was you were the bull that wanted to run down the hill. You went for that's the mistake. So we want to let me think which video it is. Videos on my video lesson series, I'm pretty sure it's lesson 6. If it's not 6, it's lesson 7, but I'm pretty sure it's lesson 6. I had a game where it opened with the Roy Lopez. I was playing a guy that both our ratings were going up really fast. And I don't remember the whole game. It started something like this, Roy Lopez. And he kept offering me pawns, and I wouldn't take them. I just kept developing my pieces. And every time I didn't take a pawn, my position improved. And I could have easily taken any of those pawns, and then he would have had some activity for it. But I just basically ran him out of moves. Eventually he blundered. He was doing okay, but I was doing just fine not taking the pawns. And as a result, he tried too hard and overpressed, and I won the game. So you don't always have to win the pawns. They'll come later. A lot of people I run into, they're trying to get up as much material as they can. Even at the lower level, the scholastic players that have really a low ability, uh, if they're winning, they will stop and liquidate every single one of their opponent's pieces. They don't have to. They could probably do a checkmate in 3 or 4 moves, but they'll take an extra 5 or 6 moves just to eliminate all their opponent's chessmen. And then they'll go for the checkmate. But guess what happens a lot? Stalemate. They get too much power. They stalemate their opponent. They're not careful. Uh, so it looks like your game was fine. Your 2 games were well played. There's just those little things that you didn't understand. You didn't understand the first game you were in a Chigorin type position. You didn't understand the bishop belonged on g4. And then you got kind of some bad pawns. You went down a pawn. You didn't understand that you could maybe break the center try to break the center open, take some weaknesses to create some play. And then even then, you missed the a5, which could get you an eventual draw. Your game was fine, but you gave them 3 chances. There are 3 chances though that you let go by. You didn't get the bishop to g4. You didn't try to break in the pawn in the center with e6, which could have been a horrible choice, but would have made him take time, and who knows what would have happened. And then you didn't break with a5. And in this game we just looked at, you took too many pawns. I think your game is fine. Just you're getting experience. Any
The thing is that I think that when you sacrifice this second pawn, it actually helps me getting some play and 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 releasing no, helping me moving my e pawn, and then I should have moved my e pawn, but instead, as you said, I miscalculated just chasing another pawn. It was more than chasing the pawn. I think I I I I I, I thought that I was spotting an opportunity to go on his rook.
mm-hmm.
That was trying to do, but eventually I totally miscalculated it, and I think I could have won this game basically because he didn't go on with the attack with his knight as you showed,
Right.
which would be a very big problem for me if he did. Then I would really have to pray.
Yeah, it looked good. It actually looked promising, but then all of a sudden the whole thing turned around. Uh, he had threats on your back rank that you could, and your 7th rank or his 7th rank, you couldn't deal with them.
Yeah.
But more practice, I think more practice next time. Next to when you play your next games, if you get a bad game, don't worry about it. Start looking for ways to confuse things. What's the worst that can happen? The guy's gonna uh, play brilliantly and wipe you out. Well, the only people that do that are grandmasters, and you're not playing a grandmaster. Okay, if you're playing a cheater, then we'll know that easily enough. I'll be able to tell.
I'm pretty much okay with losing games. It's okay. I know it's natural. I should be losing games. It's okay. I want to play better opponents and lose games and study from it. I'm really trying, but I'm just trying to maximize my ability to study from my mistakes. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting with you.
Right,
I'm
right.
trying to understand because I can go over the game with the computer
Mm-hmm.
and he spots millions of tactical shots that I missed, of course, for both sides. But it doesn't really help me. And like you say, knowing that I should be looking to complicate or to open the center or get some activity is much more useful advice for me.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I can bring all this into my game. No?
Yeah, just like I say, when you look at the candidate moves, you can't slam the door shut. Like, don't trade your good bishop. There's always going to be every rule I teach you. There's always going to be an exception, and the exception is something that you can tell if you can analyze it and evaluate it correctly. And that's where that's the tough part. Being able to tell that one choice is better than another. Here, I'll just throw something in. Just take a minute. I'll just throw something in about breaking your own rules. I was playing a guy just over a year ago. He was a strong player. I'd lost to him already one game, but now I had a chance to get a rematch. And here I chose a quiet move. I played knight c3. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details. The idea is that he just helps my development if he takes. Well, he played here, and I took, and then I developed my queen. It's kind of an odd move to bring your queen out early, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to induce him to play c6, taking away a square from a knight. Now I play d4, and he plays d6. Now, this is the kind of position where if you follow my rules to the T, you could get in trouble. What the rules say, don't make exchanges that develop your opponent's pieces. Let him make exchanges that develop yours, right? Right? Okay. Well, I analyzed so bishop f4 seems to be the natural move. Well, I saw this possibility. Okay, he comes here. Now I have to defend my b2 pawn. If I defend it with my queen, he takes, and no matter what I do with my bishop, if I take this pawn, I get pinned. Whoops. Right? So my other choice would be to castle. But I chose not to castle because I looked at it that eventually black has a ready-made attack against my king. I don't want to give him an easy free rein. So what I did was I took his pawn, even though it developed his bishop. And what did I do next? Well, I don't remember the rest of the game right now, but I ended up soon enough he played queen h4. He was trying to punish me for bringing my queen out early, and he ended up getting his queen trapped. It was really comical. He brought his queen out to try to punish me for bringing my queen out. But this was a case of where I knew that I was able to evaluate correctly that I had to break my own rule, because I need to make some kind of a decision on my pawn on e5. I don't really want him to take and get a queenside pawn majority. Don't really want that. I could or a potential c5 break right away. So I elected to take, but it's only because I saw the tactical implications of a queen coming here, and if I protect. So every rule we tell you is made to be broken. You just have to. That's what gets fun about chess, is trying to look at the possibilities and see which one is better for you. A chess engine does that instantly. It's programmed to do that. The human we can compare the positions to, but we don't necessarily assign a numerical value like the computer does. We assign a logical value, like what do I see? What makes sense here? Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
just one other question.
Sure.
Regarding you say in program, the best use of study time is actually playing correspondence, playing long games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Low time games.
Yeah.
Than analyzing. That I'm trying to do. But I don't know. Do I need some more theoretical knowledge? Do I need to read any books? Maybe master games. Maybe go over. I don't know. I do see people asking all the time about reading books, about which games to go over.
Right.
Is that a thing that you think at my level would be efficient, or would be
Oh, okay, it comes back what I talk about in video lesson 1. If you ask 10 people to the best way to study, you're going to get 10 good but different answers. I try to do things that will maximize your time. There are a few books that are just simply wonderful. One being My System by Aaron Nimzovich. That'll keep you busy a while. That's one I would recommend, because he talks about a lot of things that I'm talking about. He talks about playing prophylaxis, playing safe. He talks about uh, outposts, the seventh and eighth ranks, making exchanges where you develop your pieces. He talks about all these things, and he was good in his time, but he wasn't the best. Uh, Somebody took Grandmaster Tiger and Petrosian took Nimzovich's ideas and took them to the next level. But if you want to look for a book, that's one I would recommend. My System by Aaron Nimzovich. That'll help you a lot. Studying master games, it can work, but it's you're better off with amateur games. You're better off with amateur games because they're going to be the ones making mistakes. The masters make small, tiny mistakes, and then they exploit them with genius moves. Okay, that's kind of beyond where you're at. If you want good, in light of looking at master games, watch my videos where I commentate on games. The Team 45 League, for instance, has about 170 videos on there where I'm commenting on mostly amateur games. This new series on the team match with Carpe Diem, I think I've made 47 videos. Each one has 2 games. So there's 90. They're a little quicker. They're not as in depth as I'll do on other videos, but there's 94 games where you get a chance to see what mistakes people are making and how to take advantage of them. So you're going to learn more on my videos than you would reading looking at master games. You might even learn more looking at my videos than my system, because my system's a pretty exhaustive book. But if you want a book to read, that's the one I'd recommend. All right, sound like a plan? Just keep me posted when you want the next one. These afternoons will work fine for me because, like I say, I go to my after-school programs later in the afternoon. Anyway, have fun. Let me know when you're ready, and play some more long games. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yair. Bye now.